Malakas, what's up? I'm George. In the back you see Stavros, and then maybe in the corner you might even see Henry hiding. Welcome to our channel. Again, I want to answer some basic questions here. We're not a shop. We're just a bunch of guys that do some shenanigans in our shop and have some fun and just try to have a good time. So we appreciate all the inquiries of people asking us, hey, listen, you guys live local. Can you guys do this? I'm sorry, we can't. We don't. But you guys are more than welcome to tag along on our journey as we either break stuff, make stuff happen, try to go really fast, and hopefully don't kill ourselves. But anyway, we're back in my garage now, and I know we promised you guys a comparison video for the 12-valve and 24-valve VR6 swap motors. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go over some of the swap parts that are on the car now, or on the motor more or less, and then we're going to describe where we got the parts, how well they've been working, essentially where you can get them, what's the price average, what's the price cost on them, and what are you guys looking to spend to do a VR6 swap in a B5, in a B6, in a B7 Audi, in an Audi car. So we're going to go over that today. Hopefully it's going to answer a lot of the questions that have been out there, a lot of the misinformation that's been floating around. We're also going to go over weights. Now, we bought a scale. It hasn't arrived yet. It should be here in a couple days. So we'll update with a follow-up video on the weight differences between the 12-valve and the 24. It shouldn't be much, but we'll discuss some of the differences between the two motors and what the advantages are inside the Audi engine bay, swapping them in. So which one should you go for? Which one's the best bang for your buck, so to speak? All right, guys, so here we are. We're going to start off with Stavros' 12-valve. So, Stavros, let's start from the ground up and see what you got to say.
All right, so the first thing that you need to mount this motor in the B5 to clear the subframe without modification is a Fate oil pan. Now there are other options like the one George is using on his car, but this is the R32 Fate motor that only came in Europe. It's a little pricey, but how much would you say, George?
I think Sam sells it for about $5.50 change, but if you get lucky on eBay, EU, or UK, you could probably snag one for about $80.
Okay, so yeah, my passenger bracket is custom made. At the time when this car was originally built back in 2011, there was no brackets that were currently out there for it, similar to the bracket, the driver's side bracket that I have on the other side of the motor. That still utilizes the factory oil filter and Mokel oil filter housing, which goes to an oil cooler.
So if you make something, or if you had someone weld it, which that's what someone did, it wasn't professionally made or anything like that, or anything that's bought off the shelf, but someone took the time to kind of weld together some really solid rods of steel and made themselves a pretty cool driver's side engine bracket to work with the B5 factory style engine mounts.
And correct, and this mounts to 4 locations on the block, 3 over here and 1 in the front, so it's pretty sturdy. I mean, the car made somewhere in the 600 wheel mark before, and it lasted, absolutely no issues.
No issues, no cracks.
No
Even though
cracks.
the welds aren't the most beautiful thing, but it's definitely stout. I think the Hulk would have a problem bending some of this or messing with it.
Correct. I mean, other companies are now making parts. I believe they're making mounts that use the factory Mark III or Mark IV location for the bracket. But it literally, I mean, like I said, I mean, it uses we still use the old before mounts with no issues. Some of them were using just bracket to the frame to the subframe, but this is actually using the old before mount.
All right, so we got the oil pan out of the way. We got the brackets out of the way. What's next?
Well, no matter what, when you connect the car to the O1E, which I'm using the 6-speed O1E out of an S4, you're always going to use the adapter plate that comes out of the Touareg in Europe.
So this adapter plate comes in 2 vehicles. It's going to come in the Passat VR5 2.2, 2.3 liter motor, or it's going to come in the Phaeton 3.2 motor, the same adapter plate, and you can use it to make both the O1E trans and the VR6 motor. The only side effects to this is that it brings the motor back the thickness of the adapter plate, so you'll literally have an extra space of, let's say, 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches, that either will take up space towards the back side of the firewall or in the forward side of trimming the rad support. So that's the only thing that kind of sucks. Now, can you custom machine and weld a bell housing? People have done it before, sure, and they'll save you that space, but for the price of these, you can get them new. It's a Volkswagen factory part, and we'll list the part number in the description and the link where you can buy one. Or you can look on eBay and see if you can get lucky with the part number. You might be able to score one for like €50. All right, so now that we got that out of the way, what's next, Alvin?
We're still using the VR5 starter right here.
So there was a company that a few years ago was selling a custom billet starter, and it was very, very expensive. I'd say about $400 or $500. And it's a great starter, don't get me wrong. That starter could probably kickstart some pretty beefy motors, but the problem was it was really expensive and it killed the swap drastically. So after playing around for God knows maybe close to just 2 years of experimenting what parts work where, when I was doing my build on my 24 valve, we found that the Phaeton starter works and it bolts right up. However, with the 12 valve, there is a little bit of shaving on the inside of the block, and we'll show you on an old block that we have where you have to shave to make any of these starters work on the longitudinal swap. So just keep that in mind. While this is a bolt-in factory option, for the 12 valve only, you're going to have to shave a little bit of the block to make that starter fit. That's just the way it goes.
Some of the advantages of the 12 valve when it's sitting inside the B5 bay, there's actually a lot more room in the 24 valve because of the smaller size of the head. You can get to the thermostat housing, or basically completely around the motor. Where in the 24 valve, you're almost sitting flush with the fake firewall right here.
So if you're looking at the motor straight down, essentially what he's saying is that the 12 valve and 24 valve VR6s, aside from their internal differences, the outside appearance is a little bit smaller on the head size. And what does that mean for B5 swaps or Audi swaps, especially when you're mounting it longitudinally? It's going to give you a lot more room to work with around on the backside. So I'll give you an example, and we'll do a pan over to the 24 valve too. So you got the thermostat housing in the back of the motor, which I won't lie to you. There's about a good, I'd say 8 inches from the back of the valve cover to the actual firewall. So having that smaller head gives you so much more room to work with. And if you ever have to replace the thermostat, or if this ends up to start to leak and you have to replace it, I won't lie to you, on my 24 valve, and I'll show you guys, it's you'll see how different it is. On the 12 valve, it's so much easier to work on, it's so much easier to replace. I think on Stavros' when we had to swap out a thermostat, it took us literally 10 minutes because it's so accessible and there's so much more room. So when you come down from the back of the, from the front of the motor to the back, it's all accessible right there and you have all that extra room. On the 24 valve, as we'll show you as soon as we pan over the other motor, that's not really the case. But there's benefits on either motor. It just so happens that the 12 valve is a lot easier to work around. The 12 valve is a lot cheaper to build. It's a lot more abundant. You can probably go to any junkyard and get one for about a couple $100, if not less. So that goes for the 12 valve. As far as the differences in the actual internals, in terms, it's a quarter of the price to build. You think about it, half the valves, half the material on the inside to build these up. For a budget build, and you want to make a shit ton of power, these motors are great. You're gonna have a great time. But now let's turn over to the 24 valve, and we still haven't cleaned mine up completely, but I'm going to go into detail with you guys on, from the ground up, what we have in the car currently and what we're going to be switching to, if not what we're going to be moving to, and how well they've worked so far. What's up, everybody? This is my 24 valve VR6 motor out of my B5 S4. I'm going to go over the parts that are installed on it, swap parts to be specific, some of the suggestions that I may have. Again, take that with a grain of salt. These are my experiences. Yours may be different, but at least take it from my point of view, and then maybe go from there and then see what you guys want to do. And I'll go over as many components as I can to give you guys an idea and maybe some input on where we stand right now in terms of the VR6 swap. So let's start with the oil pan. I initially went with a Phaeton oil pan, just like Stavro did. It's a factory oil pan. It's a little bit of a rare pan, so you're going to have to contact IBEN Industries and see if he has any in stock. If not, maybe you could check eBay in Germany, or check UK eBay and see if you can get lucky. We'll try to include some of the links in the description, so be patient with that. But we ended up going with a custom oil pan from IBEN Industries only because it has a little bit more oil capacity. We live in a very hot climate here, so a lot more cooling, a lot more inlet ports in terms of like an oil return line. I reroute my catch can to recirculate back into the oil pan, so it's kind of cool that this has multiple ports. The baffling on this pan is amazing. We'll try to include some pictures in the video so you can get an idea of what the inside of these pans look like. Let's move over to the passenger side. So a lot of people ask, George, or they just ask randomly, hey, what works from the Cayenne? What works from the Touareg? Can I use the engine bracket? Let me just say this now so it kind of eliminates any misinformation floating around. Nothing works from the Touareg. Nothing works from the Cayenne, okay? I know it came with a VR6 engine. The engine specifications or the engine bay specs are different. The subframes are different, so nothing really works. Everything's off by a few inches. The only one part that does, and I'm going to be a hypocrite here, the only one part that does is this coolant pipe. Now, why is this coolant pipe significant? Is that The VR6 and the Cayenne or the Touareg came longitudinally mounted. So in order for us to maintain our radiator setup, you can use the Touareg or the Cayenne coolant pipe, and you can keep your factory S4 style radiator. If you're swapping this into an A4, you don't have to worry. You can just use an A4 rad setup and then run all your lines on the driver's side, just like as if it was a factory 1.8T. Let's move over to the the passenger side engine bracket. So this is an iBet Industries passenger style VR5 style engine bracket, and you can use a factory engine mount with it or aftermarket like I'm running. I'm running 034's billet brackets here, or billet mounts here. So it bolts right up. It's a more off-the-shelf piece as opposed to making your own custom like Stavro did on his setup. Link is going to be in the description if you want to see if the company has any in stock or if they're willing to make any for you. But haven't had any issues. It's a pretty stout piece. It's pretty solid. It's all aluminum. I even use it as a grounding port for grounding out to the chassis and the passenger side. So just another part to look out for. One of the benefits with going with the 24-valve VR6 setup, this starter again. So this is the Phaeton VR5 starter. It's a factory piece, and the beauty about the 24-valve is you don't have to shave anything, you don't have to trim anything like you do in a 12-valve. It bolts right up, literally bolts right up. So there's no modifications needed to run this starter. You can get the starter from iBet Industries. You can find it online now. Part number and link in the description if you guys are interested on where we got it from. You can hit them up and see if they have any left. More than welcome to do so. So here is the passenger transmission bracket. We went with a custom piece, which is not that difficult to make. It's a pretty simple piece, but the reason why we went with a custom unit is because the downpipe is so large for it to clear. So the passenger trans bracket comes in the way, and it just sticks out a little too much for you to run a really large downpipe. So my 4-inch downpipe was actually hitting that bracket. This definitely helps. So those of you guys who are interested, if you're handy with a MIG welder, handy with a TIG, make yourself a passenger bracket. And if you're definitely looking to run a really big turbo setup, it helps. It definitely helps in the future. So what I'm going to do now is go over the back side of the motor. As you can probably tell with Stavros' in the back, if you want to pan over real quick on the right. So on Stavros' setup, it's his 12-valve VR6. The head on those motors are a lot smaller. The 24-valve on the head has double the components. So what you guys have to realize is that it's a lot larger than the 12-valve setup. So what does that mean? Components stick out a little bit more than it does in a 12-valve. Things are a lot harder to get to. It makes basic maintenance a little bit more of a hassle. So Stavros' thermostat housing, it took us 10 or 15 minutes to change out and we were done. Mine, it took a little over an hour because of the lack of space here and how hard the things are to get to. Now excuse my janky style coolant lines, and I'm sorry that they're in the way, but the 24-valve sticks out a little bit further on the back side and the front side. So just keep that in mind when you guys are trying to decide which VR6 to go to, that the 24-valve's head is a little bit larger and it's a little bit harder to get around. Other than that, the benefits of a 24-valve versus a 12-valve, I'm sure that you can Google and look up all the benefits of going to a 24-valve or going with a 12-valve. We'll leave that to you guys. I ended up going with a 24-valve because a lot of the OEM VR6 swap parts that are able to be used bolt right up with no modification. The driver's side engine bracket, which we'll get to actually right now. Let's look at it. So this is the VR5 driver's side engine bracket. It's a factory piece. It bolts right up, has a built-in oil filter housing, so oil changes are like stock. It takes a stock part number, no modifications necessary, and you can use a factory style engine mount on it. A lot of benefits with that. It allows for a bolt up right to the chassis. It allows for OEM style oil changes and maintenance. Plus, you don't have to fabricate all too much, and it saves you a little bit of money on the upfront. Now, I've gone over my setup a little bit. Let me tell you. So the only issue that I've had, really, and I'm sure a lot of other people have had the same issue, is waiting on parts. Okay, now you guys have to realize, so a lot of the companies that used to make the VR6 swap parts, a lot of them discontinued this stuff. It was like custom billet stuff that was overpriced. Cool looking parts, I'm sure they work great, but really expensive when it comes to the average person. Like regular people like us that work 9 to 5, it's really hard to spend $500 on a starter when you're not related to anyone that lives in Dubai, all right, or who's a Dubai prince. So with that being said, now we have a lot more factory options that work. They're a lot more affordable. There are companies now making new clutch flywheel kits that are affordable. There are companies making engine brackets that are affordable, that bolt right up. Prices within our reach. So let me just tell you, so if you're willing to wait for this stuff, it is worth every minute of waiting. And that's one of the biggest hassles with this, is that a lot of people don't want to wait. Back in 2007, 2008, I attempted this swap. I gave up because parts were taking too long to come in. These days, parts still do take a while to come in. But is it worth it? Hell yes.